We do have quorum. This is a work session. We are going to get started. I think we'd like to time limit it to 9 o'clock, no later than 9 o'clock. And with that, Dr. Roberts, I'm going to turn it over to you to frame the conversation. And let me just ask, Jenna, are you listening?
She said she was going to start online.
Okay, well, we'll just get going.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board. This evening, I have with me a representative body of our executive cabinet who will actually tag team this presentation tonight. How we plan to spend our time this evening, approximately 57 minutes or so. So efficiency is critical. I'm following Madam Chair's lead with the time given. There are three areas that I want us to think about. One, we are going to respond to the board questions that were asked, and our commitment tonight is to make sure that we respond to any clarifying or probing questions that the board may have, in addition to the questions that you sent us in writing. Additionally, Shashank will have a review of the previous deck around budget as we're preparing for a board approval. And thirdly, the important conversation that was started and seems to have a little bit more sort of traction and need for clarity around the unspent spending authority that we are proposing in order to go into fiscal year 25 with a balanced budget. With that said, I am going to punt it over to Shashank, and then team, you're going to be tagged in when it's your time to come to the dais. Thank you.
And maybe one thing I just want to say for Shashank, these questions some were quite specific. And so the guidance I did give to Shashank was do your best, but then also just acknowledge when some of the questions felt too specific. And if it's still a problem and we're not doing our best to address it, then we can come back to it.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Roberts and Jackie. So the first section that we have is related to personnel. So I'm going to invite Susie, if you can come over. And we have tried to address almost all the questions that were sent to us. So the first one was how many and what new positions have been added and how are these positions funded? So this is the slide which shows the positions that were added, the positions that we are repurposing from district allocations, all the way down there. Susie, please feel free to add whatever you want to.
Yeah, so just because it says that these are added positions, know that we give every building and department a certain allocation, and sometimes based on their data needs, they may shift positions, and one they might not maintain in order to add another one, or if they went up an FTE for a building because of enrollment, they may have added another like classroom position. So it doesn't mean that these are added FTE, it just means, they're new positions for next year, but it's not an additional cost.
Susie, one of the questions that I had in general was, what guidance are we giving to principals on the non-negotiable positions, right? So latitude's being given to principals to make decisions, and yet I'm wondering sometimes, are there any that are just not negotiable, right? You can't just cut this or evolve how you want to use the money.
Absolutely, and I think there's another slide in here that addresses that.
Got it.
The next question was, how many positions are being cut? And this shows that school-based, 10 positions are being cut, 9.5 are instructional teachers, and 0.5 is counselors, and across the departments, these are the different positions that are being cut. And the 9.65 that we are showing is basically where we are in a position to shift or change the funding from general fund to some other fund.
Why would a decision be made to eliminate a counselor, given the high ratios that we have?
I believe that was just simply because of how buildings were being allocated at the high school level and the factors that go into.
Connected to enrollment or
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
The next question was, what are the total FTEs for Des Moines Public, both full-time and part-time? So this is the slide which shows that. The next question was, what is defined as a student-facing position? How many student-facing positions do we have? So we are given the definition saying any position that provides direct educational instruction or direct educational services to students are described as student-facing positions, and there are 3,586 positions.
And those are both instructional as well as other sort of socio-emotional positions, if you may.
So a community school coordinator, BFL, is that direct educational services?
Yes, school counselors.
So what is the, I don't know the math, but just out of curiosity, what's the, if you subtracted this number from the total?
So total should be around 45 to 4,700 positions. So this is almost 75-80% of the total positions, I would say.
Got it.
DMEA contract, in addition to actual increases in the amount of money they are receiving, what additions or deletions of benefits are there? There is no reduction or change in the health benefits from previous year to the coming year. Now, the cost of the benefits is definitely increasing, but to the staff, there is neither an additional cost to them nor any benefit is changing.
How much is the cost increasing?
We still have not discussed or got the final
Okay.
numbers from.
Yes, this,
Yep.
yeah, let's skip it. I don't want to.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just for the purposes of Skylar, the contracts are still in progress right now with different unions.
So under the AFSCME, it was our Metro Kids part of the $1.25 increase, so that all DMPS employees over $15 next year. So a $1.25 increase is going to impact only the food service staff. It does not apply to the Metro Kids. Metro Kids were given an increase last year, I think, Susie.
Correct. And are they over, I apologize if we asked this last time, are they over $15 an hour now?
Some of the positions are, depending on what, if you're a lead or if you're, a caregiver with direct services to students, but if you're part-time, they are not.
Is it impacting our ability to hire?
No. I mean, Metro has always been a hard position to fill, but we do regular job fairs, and we actually have had to pause this month on that and not hire any additional Metro workers, just simply because we're in a good spot and we don't want to have to lose any. We have enough individuals for over the summer, but we will have to start up hiring again in the fall, so.
Yeah, to build on that, evidence that we have thus far suggests that the challenges we've had previously with not being able to hire Metro kids individuals is not necessarily based on salary, but based on availability
Of people.
of people.
What's the starting for Metro workers again? It's not 15, right?
No,
No.
1368. I think the lowest
was
Metro
1368.
part-time worker we have is 1368. Say that on the mic for everyone.
1368.
I thought we were having all staff members be at $15 an hour. I thought we talked about that. Did I miss that?
Clarification, yeah, we looked at the chart, and the chart showed that everybody, with the exception of Metro Kids, was set to be on a path for over $15 for the FY '25, not Metro Kids. That's the one outlier.
Yeah, I just think as a parent who's been in Metro Kids, it feels like this would be the time of year when maybe you wouldn't need to add any more staff because parents have already figured out what they're going to do with their kids every day after school. So I'm sure the demand's not really there to add more kids into Metro. So I would just challenge a little bit whether this point in time in our school year is an accurate reflection on whether we're fully staffed to capacity, because why would anyone put their kids in it at this point in time?
Yeah,
Thank you,
and-
yeah.
Yeah.
And so just a question on that to follow up on Metro Kids, because that was an issue. The access to more Metro Kids programming was an issue. And so can you maybe give some general historical context? So I don't know, where were we in '24? Where are we in '25? Or where were we in '23 to '25? Like, are we cutting access to Metro Kids slots? I think that's the question to ask.
We're not, but we're happy to provide the board with numbers as well.
Yeah.
But clarifying
We didn't
question-
cut between '23 and '24?
Yeah, we did. We cut programs, didn't we? We merged some programs, so there were some schools who had Metro Kids who no longer have Metro Kids.
Yeah, I would have to defer.
Yeah, we didn't merge, we added some this year.
It'd be great to see the data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
We'll have that for the
Okay.
board. A 3-year trend data, will that please the board? 3 years?
Yeah. And I guess just along.
I feel like Metro Kids is one of those things that never came back after COVID. Like it sort of was a strong program and then just never has come back to what it once was as far as serving capacity since then.
That's a good observation, Board Member Knox, but I want to suggest that we are going to continue to actually try to rebuild that program because we understand that there's going to be value for parents. Yeah, so 3-year trend data in terms of the numbers with regards to programs.
I
as well as
guess I would
numbers.
challenge a little further back than 3, though, knowing like maybe pre-COVID would probably be a better picture of what it was like. So 2019 would probably be a better picture of what. Does that make sense?
Can I just ask, how will this information help board members moving forward with the budget process?
I think it feels like the program contracted based on feedback that we got from parents and the idea, which I think is fact, that programs, they consolidated programs, so fewer teachers, fewer parents had access to it. So I think data is just always helpful. And if we're growing it, it's helpful to know if we're putting money into growing a program, then we should understand what our growth goal is.
Okay, I just want to be cognizant of the team spending time on pulling data around things that are not specific to the goals and the guardrails and alignment to those items.
I actually would say that part of this is having a teacher workforce that has a place to send their child so that we can actually accomplish the goals and guardrails. It's a benefit to me. So if it's possible to gain some data, that'd be helpful.
Yes, Madam Chair.
The next question was on non-contract positions. So we have 322 FTEs as non-contract, and they're at-will employees. Regarding contract positions, there are 194 FTEs, which are non-bargained, largely administrators and specialists. And under non-bargain staff, the ones that have contract are largely in teaching and learning and 2 in talent and personnel. And the contracts that are given out, they're annual contracts.
They're through May 15th?
Sorry?
Through May 15th?
This
Or
is
through-
through end of June, right?
Correct.
Got it.
And now I'm going to ask Shelley to come over here, please.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Susie.
So the question was a breakdown in special education expenses.
Yeah, and I think it was specifically the breakdown between
Administration and classroom
administration,
teaching.
yes. So you'll see 2 major buckets there, the weighted dollars And those are the dollars that are specifically generated and come straight to the district based on the additional weighting of students with disabilities. And of that, there's about 99, well, we are projected to be spending about 99 million this year. That's about 10 million over, so we're in deficit of about $10 million, which is typical of a district to be in deficit for special education. Of that money.
Just to clarify, maybe for my benefit, but also for Skylar's, that's the money that you request backwards, right?
Correct. We
Yeah.
go to SBRC for requesting. So we get spending authority, but we don't get cash for it.
Thank you.
Okay. And of that, there are different restrictions on each of these buckets of money, if you will. And so we do have some administration. We have 2 APs on the weighted budget. So you see the cost there is about $250,000. So the remaining $98.7 million is spent on special education teachers, special education associates, supplementary materials, and equipment. The second bucket you see there is the support dollars, and that's what we refer to as the money that flows through the AEA, and that's about 10 million. It's actually 9.9, but $10 million. And it is allowable to have administration on this budget here, and so this is where our administrators sit for special education. And we also, this is the services, so since this is flow through the AEA, and in every other district, as we know, these are services that the AEA provides. They pay us this money and send it through, so we hire the staff that they typically hire. So social workers, psychologists, consultants, speech and language pathologists, assistive technology, all of those kinds of support staff people. And then we also have materials and equipment, anything that would be needed for identification purposes, since that's what these people do, and anything that would be needed that would be equipment or materials that would be typically above and extra specialized, like a high-low table. Those are like $10,000 or something like that. So we have those budgets there. I did leave a budget off, and I'm sorry, I apologize for that. There is another that's flow-through, it's federal dollars that comes to the district through the AEA that is used for our early access and early childhood. And so that is about $7 million. So you will remember that early access is birth to 3 years old, and then early childhood 3 to 5. And there are no administrators on that budget. It's mostly for, like I said, early access, early childhood, and then there are other things on there like a family educator partnership, those kinds of things. So those are smaller items on the budget.
Shelley, with the AEA, the shift, the 10% media, is that going to come, is that the materials and media that you're talking about?
No.
Okay, got it. And then is this just a direct pass-through, or does AEA take a percentage?
They take a percentage.
What percent?
Is it 4?
I think,
I
I'm
think
not
it's 4.
100% sure.
Yeah.
It's part of this, built up this whole thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And the change that's going to happen, 25 is nothing, 26, 10% we can take directly, and 90% will still be flow-through for special education.
Time check. We're 20 minutes in.
Thanks.
Thank you. The next question was related to mental health infrastructure. So, yeah.
Okay, so you can see the numbers there. We have licensed social workers that we pay for with that AEA flow-through dollars. We have our school psychologists, the same. We only have about 13 of them now. We're hoping to add. The situation with the AEAs has brought more staff to us. So we're hoping to add a few more that way. School-based therapists, you know, we have partnerships with several agencies, and right now we have about 48 of them. We're continually talking with other agencies to bring people into our schools. There's an error here. It says notes on funding student assistance program. Actually, for the school-based therapists, the cost to the district is we do issue them a computer and we give them space, and then they typically will bill for their services while they're in school and they're using the offices there, we also provide referrals to them. So it's no dollar cost other than that technology piece. And then school counselors, while a school counselor may not be considered a professionally licensed mental health provider because they don't have the clinical experience, we do feel like they're very important to foundational mental health services for our kids, so we went ahead and put them in there. And as you can see, it's a 50-50 split.
Just a question about the guardrail. So if I remember correctly, one of our guardrails is around psychological safety, I think is I don't know the terminology that was determined, but do you feel like, I mean, this is a big part of the resource infrastructure to support one of those guardrails?
Sure, it displays a part.
The next question related to community school coordinators. How many students do we have and how many are being filled by return positions?
Okay. So we will have 33 positions for next year. 27 of those have been filled by current community school coordinators. In fact, every community school coordinator who applied will be rehired and has been rehired. So that's what we see there. The overtime, you asked specifically about overtime, and we put every dime we could into personnel, and so we were pretty limited in that. But what we've allocated right now is 5 hours per pay period for each individual community school coordinator. Some have told us they will use it, and some have told us that they will not use that. Just a reminder that they can also use comp time. And so those are things that are worked out with the building principal.
Is it illegal to make that decision? I thought you had to.
No, we can, it's either way. So we do comp time, which is time and a half. So then.
So they'll still measure and submit time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that clarification. And then the supervision will go to the building principal, which will make it, I think, easier in a lot of ways to make sure that we're going specifically to the building's needs, and that then there's a conversation about, I would like to attend this, or I would like you to attend this, or whatever it is, and then comping that time either through actual comp time or overtime pay.
The next question was, are community school coordinators responsible for administering after-school programs?
Can you read the question again?
Are community school coordinators responsible for administering after-school programs? If they're administrating 21st century, where is that personal funding coming from?
So they are responsible for creating an enriching and engaging school environment. And sometimes that means after-school activities, and sometimes that doesn't. We have some community school coordinators where they don't do after-school activities, and the principal is very happy, and there's a lot of engagement that way. But they could do after-school activities, and 21st Century is an option in some of our schools, as you know, and this year will be the same as next year in that if a community school coordinator wants to participate and be the person who is running the 21st Century, they may choose to do that. They will be paid outside of contract hours then through 21st Century.
Thank you, Shelley.
Sure.
Thank you, that's great.
Thank you.
So as the board will see that we have leveraged the entire executive cabinet, and I requested all of them to come today so that they can provide any further insights to the whole discussion.
And even cabinet members who haven't been born yet, they're here with us.
I tell you.
The +1 is here.
Josie, you look like you're ready.
2 to 4 weeks.
So turning over to title, explain the Title I surplus and what parameters there are for schools to use.
Yeah, so kind of from the beginning, a little bit of background on title programming. Typically, there is a 15% year-over-year cap on carryover for Title I. In FY20, with the passage of ESSER, there was a stay on that from the federal government that allowed us to carry over in excess of 15%. Essentially, there was no cap from FY20 to FY23. Over the course of those 3 years, because of the access to ESSER funds themselves, and then also about 80 to 85% of title funding is typically spent on staff. Those were years that we really struggled to hire staff. If you're an elementary building and you're missing a 3rd grade teacher and you have a Title I interventionist, that Title I interventionist is going to become your 3rd grade teacher. And so that staffing position is left open. So over the course of those 3 years, we found and we got to the point by the end of FY23 that we had about $7.6 million in excess carryover. Typically, we budget for about 2.5% or 2.5 million, which is about 15% of our total allocation. So just kind of how we got into the position that we were in was a multitude of factors that led to that large carryover. For FY24, we were granted a single 1-year additional excess carryover beyond what ESSER allowed. So the state will allow you to go beyond 15% essentially once every 3 years. So we exercised that this summer in order to do that. One of the things that we ran into was that we went back and forth with the state about what year counted as the last time we requested that excess carryover. And so we didn't actually get a ruling from the state on our allowance to maintain that cash, to maintain that rollover until late September. So both us and schools kind of got a late infusion of Title I dollars early this fall, long after typical allocations are done and hiring is done, which is one of the reasons we continue to have that balance.
What is the balance? Roughly, I mean, the excess of 15%.
Yeah, so as of right now, so for FY24, we had about 21 and change, 21.2 million. And I'm gonna get into that a little bit more on the next slide.
I was just curious about after school or summer programming, so, okay.
In terms of use of funds, there are 2 different ways that schools can use Title I funds. There's targeted and school-wide programming. Targeted programming is required to be for students who are identified as at risk. We have essentially a matrix that we use to identify students that qualify for that. It does not have to do with their low-income status, even though that's what is generating the funds. It's other risk factors that we've identified as a district. School-wide programming is what the vast majority of our schools do. It's actually all but one this year use a school-wide model. Under a school-wide model, the Title I dollars can be used for any student in the building as long as it is aligned with the school's school-wide action plan, which is our collaborative problem-solving process. Before I go any further,
The next question was the changes to Title I
Yep.
schools.
Yeah, so one of the things I know I've heard kind of questions about and concerns about is the reduction in Title I costs and how the change in model may have actually impacted schools. So one of the things that I've laid out here is that the largest impact to our schools and the amount of dollars that they actually have available year over year between FY24 and FY25 is that total available funds. For FY24, by the time we got all of our carryover allowed from the state, we're at about $21.2 million for this school year. For FY25, we're estimating about 13.6. We always estimate in the spring for allocation purposes 85% of our total of our real allocation of the year before. That's the federal hold harmless percentage. So it is, they would have to pass extra laws to go lower than that. So that's the number that we send out to schools for them to use for their, for the purpose of identifying and paying for staff. Staff is, I know one of the questions that was asked was about like the actual total number in staff changes. Because we're still in the process of finalizing those staffing plans, we won't have those final numbers until the end of May. However, Per some conversations I had with our team in talent and personnel, the expectation at this point is that we're not expecting anyone to be let go because of the model change or even because of the funding change, because there are enough open spaces in other places where people may be shifted around, or they may go into a classroom position or some other position, or move to another building through that attrition and fill process.
Just to clarify, they're not leaving the district, but the building would lose that person as a resource.
Yes, that's possible, absolutely.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Are there additional funds that could be used to support or accelerate the board goals? So is one of the reasons that we're not accelerating as fast as we can, is that connected to human capacity?
I wouldn't draw that conclusion at this time, Madam Chair. If it pleases the board, I would want to wait for us to think about resource allocation, wait until we have that deeper conversation with our interim goals and guardrails.
Thank you.
Just kind of along with this, just so you can kind of see with the change in model that we used between using the direct certification, which is state data, and OLR, which is our own internal data collection process for low-income students, we went from, for FY24, 32 of our 38 elementary schools to 36 of 38 of our elementary schools. And then we added additionally 2 of our middle schools and all of our high schools. So that's where that increase in actual number of served students comes from.
Will there be a cliff at some point? I'm just not trying to equate this to the CSCs, but is there will we run out of money, and will that impact Title I funded staff?
Yeah, so one of the things that the federal, and this gets, I think in the next slide, we talk a little bit about the sustainability of the title plan itself. One of the things that's actually required of Title I programming is that you have enough funding at any building that's identified for Title I access to be a viable program. And essentially what that means is the state wants to see and the federal government wants to see at least enough for a staff member and then some costs associated with the Title I program. When the Federal Program Steering Committee ran the numbers in a couple of different ways, we didn't have any problems reaching that barrier for all of the identified schools.
So I shifted to the next slide, and this is what Josie responded to, the sustainability of this title plan.
Yeah. And so the kind of the 3 guiding principles that we came away with that sustainability question was, and actually one of the underlying premises for the change was sustainability. Even before COVID, we were seeing, we were consistently hitting that carryover allowability or even leaving money on the table year over year because we weren't spending down the dollars. Additionally, stability. This year we had a school that fell below the 40% rate, which means that school is grandfathered in for a single year, but then may fall off. When we look at our OLR data as opposed to our direct certification data, we're much consistently higher across the district with our number of low-income students. Additionally, almost all other district decisions are made using our online reg, our home survey data about who are our low-income students. That direct certification data that comes from the state is essentially only allowed to be used for that purpose. So it's a different way of thinking about how we identify needs.
Moving towards this model really allows us to sort of anchor our work around focused equity. So only 2 of our schools out of the 64 will not have the benefit of title funds moving forward. Next question.
Show all positions that were partially or fully funded using Title I. Which of these are new positions, and what communication is taking place?
Yeah, and so this goes back to we're still working through those allocation worksheets and finalizing those staffing plans, but What we've provided here is from the district lens, we provided as the K-8 allowable positions under title. There are some pretty strict requirements from the state and federal governments about what title is allowed to be spent on. And so these are the list of allowable positions that we have for our K-8 programming. That student, family, and community coordinator is one that we're still working with the DE on allowability around, but just to be aware of. High schools, because high schools were in kind of a very different position where only one of them had had Title I previously, we're starting with them with a much tighter model. They were only allowed interventionists under this first year.
So does that mean all of these are funded by Title I, or they can be funded
They
by?
can be funded by Title I. And that's either because it's a position that is only allowed for Title I buildings, or we have a base allocation that then we're able to demonstrate that we go above and beyond with title.
The next question was, what protocols are put in place to get staff to spend Title I dollars on a more regular basis?
Yeah, so this is a large portion of the work of the Federal Program Steering Committee, which started last summer as a way to build more collaboration between federal programs and teaching and learning and our other departments. That team meets essentially every 6 weeks, but quarterly one of our tasks is to examine fund balances and then to provide additional targeted support for schools that continue to have high fund balances in conjunction then with their network supervisors around their action plans and what actually makes the most sense and meets their building's needs based on those needs assessments that they're doing in that action planning process. Again, going back to tightening that alignment. Additionally, the federal programs team itself is doing a lot of work around helping to provide some guidance and some additional documentation that schools can take and based on their needs, utilize and adjust in order to complete larger programs like purchasing additional library books and things like that. Additionally, going forward, one of the things with that change in model is that there'll be less excess dollars at the building level for them to spend down.
I know this is probably out of line. I was just curious how this concept of switching title came up. Was this just sort of an analysis across the board, or was this something we've seen other districts utilize effectively, or kind of what? I never heard a lot about this, I feel like, until you came, Dr. Roberts, so I'm kind of interested in your assessment.
It's a practice that is utilized in districts across the country, and certainly we also saw this as an opportunity to make sure that we are impacting much larger group of students.
Thank you, Josie. For the next question, I'm going to request Susie and Shelley to come over. So these are the non-negotiables. So what non-negotiable staff positions are mandated in every school?
20 minutes, team. Let's be thoughtful about our extended responses.
And if you want, Shashank, because I think there was some discussion about emailing this, I'll defer to you on how you want to handle that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But Jackie, this goes to the question that you were asking earlier about what are the.
We have it in email.
Yeah.
We all have it in our email.
Oh, got it. Today?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it. I defer to you. It's your time to use.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, this just goes back to the question that you had earlier of what are the base positions. And what we tell buildings is you cannot reduce these positions, you can only increase them. So we have district-based positions, and then each department has their own as well, based on the formula and criterias that they use for staffing.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move to the next question.
What positions must every school have to achieve board goals? If a school is not slated to have it in FY25, what adjustments are being made?
Not this slide.
Not the slide, this was, so maybe this was not responded to. This was actually from Tim, and obviously he is out. So maybe that's why we don't have a response. So we will come back
And I
to this one.
think, is this an example where once the goals and guardrails are,
Established, yes, Madam Chair, we will
Then-
look at allocating resource specifically to achieve goals, interim goals and interim guardrails.
So then, thank you. We'll switch over to Lisa.
and Patrick was the one who had IT questions,
Is he on? He said he's on, okay.
so he can watch the video.
So the question on technology was, the board approved a significant expenditure for technology in '24. What changes were made with what investment?
So the slide here is what the board approved last year. The approved budgeted amounts compared to the actual amounts. So you'll see, first line item is the wireless network infrastructure upgrade, where we replaced or are replacing every piece of hardware supporting the network. And it is in total about $7 million project. We are leveraging a federal program called E-rate through the FCC, and through that, we are eligible for an 85% offset from the FCC. So our responsibility is only 15%. The one caveat to that is every 5-year period, we're granted categorical funds under that program. And so what you'll see is the approved was 0.9, but the actual is 1.7. That's because we exhausted our benefit for this 5-year period. And so our actual expenditure was a little above that 15% mark because we had exhausted our benefit under that E-rate program. But we were able to utilize save and general funds to continue that project, and that will be completed before September 30 of this year. The second is a $1 million line item for additional staff. We did not identify a funding source for that, and so we did not take action on those. And third is a cybersecurity program development and maturity, so an additional investment, a concerted effort into our cybersecurity related to events of last year. We contracted with several partners and vendors to help us develop a cybersecurity program, as well as mature the development of that. So, sorry, my computer is not, this is ironic. Sorry. So under the partners and services, what we were able to do was contract for a virtual chief information security officer to lead the development of the cybersecurity program, contract for services for managed detection and response so that we were able to watch the events happening in our environment and respond to threats that were active. We were able to expand the licensing for the protection software to all of our student computers, engage with different consultants and services to augment our staff capabilities, and re-qualify for cyber insurance. So those were some of the expenditures that were outlined in that. And the actual spend, right, for FY23 is actually 1.3.
Lisa, just a clarifying question. I remember us approving money for additional staff, so I'm looking for clarity around finding the money.
So I think what had happened was the decision on CIO and project managers have been deferred. And probably you can answer what I mean,
Yeah, I think it's just trying to understand the true investment that was made, because I think last year there was a lot of discussion about significant investment, and so we can table that, because I think that there's some additional thinking you've been doing around technology investments, but.
We are. Matt, you can also add some context, but
Yeah, I was just going to add that we also didn't make enough reductions in other areas to actually warrant a general fund expenditure in some of those positions. So while we were looking to allocate $1 million, that $1 million was predicated on reductions in other areas.
Thank you. Next question.
So the next question, I'm sorry,
No, that's fine.
I'm doing your job.
Please provide the number of staff and positions names for IT.
So I've outlined that here. We don't have to go through all of those. Essentially, we have 24 staff, that's including the director. And then you can see all of the job titles on the two separate teams and the number of people who occupy that particular role.
The next question was, please provide the total expenditure that is being spent in personnel and consultants and third-party vendors.
So the internal DMPS IT staff, salary and benefits for those 24 staff on the previous slide come to 2.8 million. We also have a program to hire high school interns, and that comes to about $14,000 for this year. And then we have multiple strategic partners. As I referenced, we rely on these strategic partners to provide staff augmentation to services that our internal team does not have capacity to do. And that can be a myriad of services, from one-time project-based engagements to long-term development or overall operations maturity. So that's laid out for you there if you have any questions.
How is the ROI measured? What data points can you cite as a proof of success for increased investment?
Sure. So the way that we measure return on our investment is through a measurable maturity model, both on IT operations in general and specific to the cybersecurity development. What you'll see on this maturity scale is from 0 to 4, from no maturity at all to very adaptive maturity. As of March 2023, we scored very low, about a 1. And when we retook our assessment earlier this year, we did see a significant move on that maturity. And the growth there was based mostly on the acquisition of tools, softwares, and contracted services to help us do more and meet the capacity needs. And now what we're focusing on is the more difficult task of changing the culture and having developed processes and policies in place to shift the mindset of cybersecurity is not an IT problem. It is an organizational task that everybody has to be involved in. So we are anticipating that it will, like our maturity and our return will start to slow over these next couple of years, but we will continue to see measured progress on that front through our concerted efforts with our finalizing some of our big projects and the continued work with our virtual chief information security officer, as well as those managed detection and response services. So, yeah, questions?
Thank you. 10 minutes, thank you.
I just wanted to say, Lisa, thank you for putting out there that we were at like a 0.5 as far as IT goes and have come a little ways, but a long way to go. And so I'm glad that that's recognized by staff. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. The next section is on PD, and I will need help from either Matt or Shelley, because this is actually Tim's section, but Tim is not here.
I think we can just look at it. I don't
Okay.
recall who asked the question.
And if there's specific question, I can answer those, or we can have additional support. So if the board would like to just,
I think
Gloss over.
you asked this at the board table, how much we've spent on Gleam?
Yeah,
To date?
to date, 1.8 million.
1.8, yes.
How are I think one of the questions coming out of that Gleam experience, how are teachers being brought along? It seems to be a lot of trainings and trips and things like that for leadership, but are there experiences for teachers to build excitement and buy-in as well, outside of just the classroom visits?
yeah, they're rich experiences for teachers, actually. In addition to their attendance at Standards Institute, where they're actually interacting with and engaging around the Gleam practice with the folks from Unbound Ed. Teachers are also benefiting from targeted feedback with regards to the GLEAM framework and walks. We've, as a part of the practice, again, we've invited and brought along some teachers, I believe, in some of those GLEAM walks with school leaders. So, yeah, this coming summer, actually, we are, the number evades me, but we're sending a significant number of teachers from different schools to Standards Institute so that they, again, can continue to benefit from that professional development. Not only teachers, but they will be accompanied by school leaders as well as district leaders.
Okay, it's not noted in here, so I just want to call that out, that teachers are not identified as participating. So I just want to make sure, because that's something that I think is not reflected.
I thought in participants under section 3, Jackie, it says principals, APs, instructional courses, coaches, PLC leads, teachers, teaching and learning coordinators.
Yeah, that says, it's different than the Standards Institute in the TRIP. And I'm just,
Sure, okay.
it's a
That's
separate
fair.
conversation, but I think it's different. Right now, the lot of energy and investment in the leadership to implement the GLEAM framework, but at the same time wondering how we're getting teachers energized and excited as well.
Yeah, they are going to participate in Standards Institute. Additionally, remember, our goal is, and I share this with the board, we value our partnership with Unbound Ed, but we do not necessarily want to be in a long-term relationship. So the goal is to build capacity in those who are leading the program so that we can start to turnkey and to have internal leadership around professional development around the model.
The next question was what memberships, ongoing technical assistance on retainers, best practice sharing organization, etc. does DMPS have? And these are the different professional development providers that we are working with at this point in time. The next question is on transportation, and Matt can give some color to that. So we have a contract through FY 2028, $1.2 million. We know some of the financial issues that DART is going through, and they're reducing some trips, which is a $300,000 contract. Possible reduction. Do you want to add anything else to that? Perfect. Thank you.
Is that the north route? What is the 10-tripper routes?
Currently, there's a conversation about which routes would be the most appropriate routes to take. Right now, we're not on the same page regarding which routes would be most beneficial for our kids. So we're in continued conversations with the DART leadership team around selecting the routes that are not the highest used routes by our students. While that might create some inefficiencies for DART, we get that. We're trying to be great partners and figure out a way that we can find some middle ground there.
And so the goal would be to find funds within DMPS to address.
Well, thank you for that question. $300,000 would be coming back to us from that contract that's currently as it's written, and we would look to reinvest those dollars differently to expand and enhance our transportation services.
Got it.
Thank you,
How
Matt.
do you track utilization?
Through just ridership, so
But do they, is it with a pass, or how do you know what students are actually
stops,
using?
pickups and stops, so we record every pickup and stop every day that we make.
Number of students?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, got it.
If there are no other questions, we'll go to the programs. Shelley, I'm looking at you again. And Tim is on vacation, so he's not been able to provide, but Shelley has been trying to help. So what new programs are we adding? This is based on a future. Go ahead, Dr.
To be determined.
Yes.
Again, this is a new board goal. We are having a lot of robust conversations because of our investment in this goal. So on Tuesday the 16th, we should have additional information.
What programs are we growing?
Do you want to talk about
Yeah, I can certainly jump in. Just programs to support our middle schools, recognizing that we are navigating the sort of developmental and age-appropriate behaviors that we are experiencing with our middle school scholars. And so we are being really intentional around not only an infusion of SCL practices, but also looking at some changes in personnel that will support the work around growing programs. Additionally, we have an exemplary program around alternatives to suspension across the district. So, for example, we currently have a partnership with community partners where our middle school students who have had some behavioral challenges, instead of having them out of the school setting without any supports, they're actually spending time with some of our community partners. Additionally, they're also benefiting from teachers. I believe we have 4 virtual teachers who provide support to those students who may be out on out-of-school suspensions. Looking at an additional credit recovery lab, we're looking at the north side of town because we're thinking about the demands that we're having for additional students who we can get to the finish line of graduation.
Is there already one of those? Is that at Lincoln? Or do we have a credit recovery lab currently?
How many credit recovery do we have?
We have credit recovery labs for teachers in every one of our high schools now. And so what happens is we get a waiting list. We have 90 students on the waiting list now, and those credit recovery labs in the high schools are trying to get those credits recovered, and they're going to the kids who need it most. And so it's hard to keep up on those kids that just maybe didn't pass a class or two. So the lab will help with those kids who are a little further behind. And so we'll keep the labs in the high schools as well.
And then have another location just located, like in a partnership or in at North High?
No, on the north side. We're looking at locations on the north side, not necessarily in a high school. Just like Options is on the south side, we need to have something that's closer for students who are in that area of town, so it's easier.
We've looked at a couple of locations, actually, so feeling good about that. Next. Future Ready, again, program goal, next Tuesday. And finally, growing our Montessori programs. Of course, we've looked at the data, not only national data around the impact of a high-quality Montessori education, but looking at Coles as one of our highest performing schools. And so clearly, we believe that sort of replicating the practices in Montessori bodes well for an increased population of students, particularly students who are demographically not necessarily represented at our current Montessori model. So we're adding pre-K classes at Pleasant Hill with the goal of growing the Montessori program there. And then at Finley Elementary School, we are going to have the K-5 Montessori model at Finley with teachers and leaders being trained this summer.
So, go ahead.
So that's a go live for fall at
Yes, ma'am,
Finley?
first day of school.
Is Finley still going K-6?
Finley is still going K-6, but Montessori only at K-5, because remember, we're using the K-6 model as a pilot, and then there are also some state expectations and reporting around the 6th grade, so we're going to do K-5.
Montessori requires teacher training because it's a totally different philosophy. So what is the training that our teachers are receiving if they're at Finley?
There are a number of training modules that are scheduled, and these include Montessori Institutes. We have teachers and leaders who've already attended the American Montessori Association, I believe is the name, training. So teachers will be exposed to training. They cannot implement the model without training. And because we're going to start on day 1 of school year 24-25, teachers will be adequately trained.
It requires certification, right?
They require certification.
So they're not going to be certified before the fall?
Some of them may not, but again, that's ongoing. They don't need to be certified before they start the actual implementation.
Yeah, just to say that it does take an extended amount of time, and whenever we get a new teacher, like at Coles, it takes a while to train up. But that's an ongoing, significant investment. So thanks to our leadership at Finley for taking that on.
And I can email, I have some questions about Montessori. I'll email you.
Thank you. Look forward to responding to those.
What programs are we ending? So as you see, none of the programs are being ended. Decreased funding, what programs are we decreasing funding?
And it's not really a decrease, it's reallocating. So as we're adding to our middle school. We're using some of those funds from teachers that we've used at our high school. And high schools have indicated that they have some teachers that they are giving stipends to and additional pay so that they can do some of the suspension programs at the high school level to keep students more actively engaged and connected with staff at the high school. So it's a shift of funding.
Who are the administrative leaders for ELL positions in DMPS?
Yep, so again, recognizing that this is one of our vulnerable populations, and while we have a lot of success stories around ELL program administration, there's still a lot of room for us to grow, improve, and get better. So we are actually revisiting and revamping what this looks like. So in addition to curriculum coordinators, we are poised to hire a new director of middle schools who will actually have responsibility for our ELL administration. Additionally, we are very close to hiring a chief academic officer who will have the responsibility of leading the district's instructional and academic mission and vision, and certainly improving our ELL program will fall under the auspices or within the wheelhouse of that chief academic officer.
Just a question. So for the director of middle schools, are you putting ELL there because that's where you would put it regardless of the person, or are you putting it there because of the person you intend to hire?
Repeat the question, I don't think I got it.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the responsibility of ELL programming is put with the department, with the director of middle schools?
No, the director of middle schools, for ELL programming at middle schools. ELL program, of course, transcends just grade 6 through 8. So how this is slated here, it speaks as if the director of middle schools will have the responsibility, direct responsibility for all ELL programming. No, that's not accurate.
Okay.
Middle schools.
What are the new investments being made in the middle schools, sir?
So the alternative to suspension program that we spoke about earlier, I believe, and then a stronger partnership with DMEA leadership and admin.
Yeah, thank you. We have an ongoing discussion, conversations, and meetings right now with our DMEA executive team, as well as some of their teachers in our TAC, Teacher Advisory Committee. They're meeting, they've had several meetings, I believe, with our middle school leaders, and they're working collaboratively to really strengthen how we can create some consistency with regards to processes, protocols, and procedures in middle school to build stronger middle school climate and culture.
What funds are being invested to support middle school after-school programs? Whether you can address that now or later, but my understanding is that was an area that was identified as significant need.
So this is the question that you're asking, Jackie.
I'm wondering specifically for middle school, because that came up last year. That's an under-supported area, and so I'm wondering what investments, other than the two that we've seen so far, what money is being invested to support middle school?
Yeah, one additional investment, Madam Chair, will certainly be discussed at next Tuesday's meeting because for the first time, we now have a specific middle school goal. So we're looking at allocating the appropriate amount of funding to support middle school academic programs.
What is the cost of the Montessori programs being added to Finley? And how many new teachers are being added? So at Finley, it's basically right now certifications and materials costs that we're talking about. And for Pleasant Hill, it's a pre-K startup cost, and we are estimating around $350,000 for that investment. Total?
Yes.
350 total between both.
Yeah.
No,
No, only for Pleasant Hill.
The cost is not listed for the Montessori training and materials for teachers and staff at Finley. We can certainly get that to the board once.
You're
we-
basically repurposing teachers into Montessori teachers.
And they're doing so with lots of enthusiasm.
Good.
Yep.
It's awesome.
So the next question was on after-school programming. Matt.
Question? What's the
Who's
question?
responsible for the after-school programming? What funding does DMPS receive to provide after-school programming?
So maybe, this may be like the surface level answer to maybe what your question
Yes.
was previously, Jackie. So what we can do is, these are the various funding streams that are braided to fund all of our programs, primary, middle school, and then high school levels. We can get you exact numbers per level
I
from
think
each
I'm
funding
just,
stream.
it was called out last year, I think, as an identified need to invest in after-school. So I'm just wondering what's changed from last year to this year in terms of the investment in middle school.
Like what would be different programs?
After-school activities, I mean, we didn't, the need was lifted up, I think, by you and others, that this was an area of needed investment, that our that our middle schools had been underfunded, maybe isn't the right word, but required a little bit more.
Yeah, there's an opportunity for us to invest more resources, whether that's personnel or
So I'm just
after-school
looking to
programs.
see what that is. What is
Sure.
the actual investment in?
Well, I think it might be helpful if we come back to you with some data that also defines the various programs available, because this was actually limited based on what I wrongly assumed the question was. It was about athletics and activity programming, which is here, but there's a significant amount of programming that's not directed through the activities office. It's through community schools office and developing programs within the community itself. To bring in, whether it be 21st Century funded or some other Parks and Rec funded initiatives. So I can tease that out and give you some broken
Maybe
down
I'll just say
data.
it differently. Dr. Roberts, I felt like you really shepherded the need for a middle school goal. And part of that was because there seems to be a focus on middle schools. And so what are you recommending as investments in middle school? And that's what that's what I'd like to see.
Yes, we'll bring that to the board.
Dr. Roberts, I'd add, through the staffing process, based on enrollment reductions, middle school could have been reduced staff because their enrollment has declined. But we kept the levels of staffing the same for middle school, and that's why you don't see any staffing reductions there. And there was also, due to funding, a reduction to this school engagement coordinator position, where they were going to go half-time, but the decision was to maintain those positions as full-time, so that every middle school had a full-time position rather than a half-time, in order to, support the after-school programming. So
Great.
those were just.
Thank you, Susie.
The next question was, please provide a list of all grants. We are happy to provide, Jackie. There are almost 50 to 60 different grants, but what we are providing, 83 grants, so we have 40 grants that we have already received, which is almost equivalent to $8 million. And 43 grants we are working on, which is $5.5 million. So totally around 13.62 grants. And I can send an email to the board listing out all the different grants that have been received and which are pending. Capital investments, is Dave here by any chance, or Matt? Oh, Dave is there, perfect. He's hiding behind it.
Time check, 9:10.
So the question was, the 5-year plan on the website is not updated for FY '23-24. Are all the highlighted investments taking place?
As you'll note here, and we've talked a little bit about in the past, we have made some changes to the current 5-year plan in terms of sort of hitting pause on a few of the things that we have scheduled, largely just so that we can make sure that we're actually being prudent with those investments. One thing I will note is that the vast majority of projects that are on the list, and by the way, the website is being updated. The person that I have working with me she's out for a couple of days. The vast majority of projects that we've sort of hit pause on for right now are things that perhaps the intended scope of the original project is not. We're not going to do the full project, but we're maybe going to go in and a lot of the projects are things like interior painting. So maybe rather than going in and painting all of the walls in a building, we're going to go in and we're going to address some of those areas that are really in need. Masonry, the outside of buildings, maybe rather than going and updating the masonry or making some repairs across the entire outside of a building, we may just focus for now on some of those areas that are in specific need of being addressed. So So no, we're not doing every single project as was originally intended in the plan. We're trying to be as prudent as possible and, you know, so to speak, sort of keep the powder dry a little bit as we look at what's coming.
Thanks.
Okay?
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
The next question was on guardrails, general discussion and understanding of investments by guardrail. And
April 16th.
Yep, April 16th. Yep. So that is the list of questions that we had, and then come to spending authority. So this is what I had alluded to in the last budget meeting. So the reason why the decision was made by the district to start looking at spending authority very seriously. So there are two different line graphs. One is the blue one, which has got the regular general funded cost, including categoricals. And the yellow line shows only the regular fund cost.
Sorry, keep going.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you saw, our situation was extremely precarious in 17, 18, 19. In fact, in 18 and 19, if you took away the categoricals, we were negative. And we decided to take off categoricals because categoricals, as I've mentioned, can be used only for specific purposes. They are part of general fund, but they cannot be treated like true general fund dollars. So we started tracking on it. And if you see the board had set a goal because we were that bad that we need to achieve at a minimum 15% of our spending authority. 2023 is the first year that we actually went above, and 24 we are further ahead. So we're closer to almost 17, 18%. And that's the reason why we felt comfortable taking that $5 million to bridge the gap this year. And the next slide, if you see, actually shows the dollars between the regular and the categorical. So if you see the regular dollars, they're close to almost $120 million. So if we take away $5 million from that, yes, it does come down, but not significantly, and still it's above 15%.
So if you took the roughly $4 million that you're recommending, what's left? And I know it's a little hard to project, but what's the general?
It'll be close to what we're ending FY24 with. So it'll be close to 118 to 120 million dollars. Because, so this is an estimate.
After the 15%?
No, so if you look at 15%, the 15%, so this is an additional 3% almost. So I would say close to around, if you keep it above 15%, roughly should be somewhere in the 15 to $20 million range, Jackie.
Not including the 4 million.
Not including the 4 million, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that is what we had prepared as a deck. Now, the other thing that you had mentioned was if we want to talk about any questions which the board has from the previous decks that we have shared. So if there are any questions, I can pull up that particular deck and we can discuss it.
Well, I think, and I'm looking at all of the board members, it feels like the goal was to get as much done as possible tonight. April 16th is the goals, the guardrails, the interims conversation, where there probably will be some additional discussion about investments. I think the question is, are we going to support the budget, knowing that an amendment will likely take place to make sure the resources are reflected for the goals, guardrails, and interims to be accomplished?
That's accurate, Madam Chair. And if I may add before the board weighs in, our ask is to have an approval, if the board so choose, on April 16th, recognizing that we have a long window of time, an extended window of time within which we can make amendments as necessary.
I'm curious what other people, I would just love to hear how board members are feeling about that, if anybody has opinions.
Are we able to take our books with us to go over 'em? Okay.
Kim, do you have thoughts?
I'm okay with, I feel comfortable proceeding, knowing that the information will be revisited once the board completes the goals and guardrail process. My wondering is just the item that came up today regarding that $1 million investment in safety, particularly in the CIO position. That particular item was something that we focused heavily on as an investment to meet that particular guardrail. And I believe that tonight is the first time that we're hearing about that particular item not being fulfilled, so.
That is correct.
My wondering is, I really appreciate when we're focused on how the investments we're making are going to make an impact, whether they be short-term or long-term, on our trajectory towards meeting the goals while honoring the guardrails. So that being said, if in fact we approve the budget next week, revisit based on the approved goals and guardrails, I think that's a must, but then I would say if it's the will of the board, particularly looking at our policies or conversations around, if there is a significant change in those investments, that be visited as well at some point.
That's great feedback.
Those are my thoughts right now.
So maybe what I might recommend is we'll identify a date. So let's, by May, end of May, early June, where we feel like we've made some changes to the budget as needed based on the goals and guardrails. But then I think creation of policy or some check-ins or some ability to understand if the staff is departing from investments that were approved to support the goals and guardrails, that we're made aware of that, and that's a discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's helpful for us.
Yeah, and I just, I'd say to my board colleagues, in previous goals and guardrail sessions, I was referencing the significant investment that we made in that safety guardrail. And those statements probably need to be adjusted based on this new reality. So we'll take that into consideration as we continue to discuss finalization of those items.
If I could, I spoke my thoughts last board session on the fund balance. I really think it'd be helpful to give some feedback to Shashank on the fund balance and Dr. Roberts so they can work to finalize the budget.
Are you asking in regards to whether we support their usage of the, what was it,
I think it was
5.525?
5.25.
$5.25 million.
Yeah, I mean, I think my opinion was that this better be a one-time situation, knowing that we have a lot of changes coming for the next year, and that we're sort of viewing it as such, was my perspective. I think I said explicitly, that's why you have a savings account. So
just to be clear.
it's putting a lot of trust into the staff that they recognize that this is a one-time situation to move forward.
You say that, though, if next year the Reimagining Education Groups comes forth and wants to spend $10 million of that fund balance, that's different than the one-time use of this time. Are you differentiating the two?
I mean, I am, because I think right now we're just trying to put the budget together, right? And so, again, you sometimes dip into your savings to make sure you make your payments, and then you sometimes dip into your savings to invest it in something that's going to come back tenfold. And so, to me, this is looking at dipping into the savings to get us through this year and get a really good plan underneath us. And if we have to go back, it needs to be for something that's going to result in increasing enrollment or more dollars into this district.
Shashank, can you also pull up, for the benefit of board members as they're responding, the line graph that shows our fund balance?
Other general comments,
No, I do just want to say thank you, Kim. You said it far more eloquently than me, which was that I feel like this is the second year we've come back and sort of what's been presented in the budget conversations has not aligned with what actually happens throughout the year. So as a board, whether that's policy or practice or I don't know what it looks like, I would like to not have a surprise next year and make sure that everything that we approve and discuss for the public actually happens in our schools. So I echo that.
Thank you. So again, just looking at the group, is there general support of the request to use unspent spending authority in the budget? Because that's a major question to be answered tonight.
Yes, my opinion is, yeah, I mean, just like Jenna says, the money's there for us to use in one-time thing. It goes back, so, yeah.
Okay, Maria?
Yeah.
Kim? Yes. Do you have an opinion? I don't want to put you on the spot.
I generally feel that it's probably, I'm supportive of it.
You know how I feel. I think the only thing I'd ask is, imagine you didn't have this money, and have you looked at all non-FTE expenditures? Because I think that's really important.
That's fair.
Thanks. Are there any other?
Is Patrick online?
No, he's going to have to watch this. So
Do we know his thoughts on that?
I don't want to speak for him, so I'll make sure to,
That's fair.
yep. Thank you for asking that. Shashank, are there any other big items that you feel the need to get board feedback as we're working towards the 16th?
No, I think we were addressed, this was the biggest rock that we were talking about, using the funding balance, and we wanted to demonstrate that this is the first time that we've actually used it, and the hope is should not be using it, especially for mitigating the operating deficit.
If we want to put that in policy, that's a board policy around that when we're talking about the 15% utilization, that we'd also try and put additional parameters around it?
So I think I'm live, okay. We used to have when we had management limitations, goals and management limitations, we had a management limitation that specifically addressed our budget planning processes. And so when those management limitations went away, anything that was not a goal or a guardrail, or the board identified as a guardrail, if it was something that we wanted to, as a system, keep in place, it should be created as district policy. Now, we have had a guardrail in place that spoke to that at a very high level. And that has been also, we're moving away from that particular item as well. So I believe that was an interim goal at one point, or interim guardrail, pardon me.
Where is
Was
the
the
15%
15%.
codified? Is that,
Well, originally it was codified in the management limitation. Then it got moved to an interim guardrail of that fifth guardrail that we had. Yeah. And now it will be, I'll just say, it sounds like it will be sunsetting. So if that is something, if we as a board feel it is something that is important enough to keep in place and monitor, then we need to put it into, codify that into a goal or a guardrail. Or ask that if the district also feels it's important, add it to district policy.
yeah, and I just want to commend Shashank, you and the team and the board, the previous board that put in place the 15%. I mean, to have the luxury right now to say, spend $4 million is, I think, a congratulations to everybody that was involved in making that decision.
I think that was Terry, I believe.
Well, wouldn't be surprised.
It was before my time that they had said the 15% before I joined DMPS.
Yeah. Any other things that you want to cover? Dr. Roberts?
No, Cabinet, thank you, Executive Cabinet.
Thank you
did
very
an
much.
awesome job.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate everybody staying late tonight, too. Thanks for your hard work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Our work session is done. You are like